What's going on, everybody? It's Warren, and we just watched the very first episode of the Loki series on Disney+. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. The first episode was a great combination of setting up what is about to happen while combining a lot of different aspects to the story of Loki, this new Loki that we have, who has found himself taken out of the main sacred timeline and into the possession of the TVA, where we get a lot of comedy and are introduced to a lot of different awesome characters. But there are some key moments in this, especially at the end, that you need to know about to grasp what is actually going on here. So this is going to be my Loki episode 1 ending explained video, combined with a little bit of an explanation of some other things that happened in this episode as well. And I'll be doing a lot of Loki videos in the upcoming weeks when the series is coming out, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. So this won't be my full episode breakdown. That'll come out tomorrow, but there are a few key points that we have to go over for this ending explained video, and the first one is Loki getting taken into the possession of the TVA. Now, Loki has never heard of the TVA before, and as Owen Wilson's character, Mobius M. Mobius, explains later on, he never knew about them because he never needed to. Now, one thing that you need to know about the TVA is it exists outside of time. I'm sure most people got the gist of this, but it's kind of vaguely alluded to when Loki and Mobius are in the elevator, and Loki asks Mobius how long he's been there for, and Mobius says, well, that depends. Time works differently at the TVA. So you have to realize that these people control time, and to control time, they exist outside of it. We were introduced to the sacred timeline, but the TVA is not a part of the sacred timeline. They exist outside of every timeline there could be and will be. And here's something that you really need to know because it's really important for the future of not only Loki, but the MCU. The first episode does a great little animated presentation of what the TVA is and how the sacred timeline started. Notice that they start off by mentioning the multiverse. They said there was a huge multiversal war in which there were countless unique timelines. This is very important to know and understand because this could explain a lot of important future details in the MCU, like possibly how the mutants could have come into existence. The mutants might not have been in our main timeline. They could have existed in a different timeline where things went very differently. However, there were the timekeepers who took all of the timelines and basically combined them all into one sacred timeline, which is the main MCU timeline. Thus, they could have combined the mutants into our timeline, and now they all exist together. Another very important thing to note about this story is that it is basically the Secret Wars storyline. There are two different Secret Wars comic book storylines, and they are definitely some of the best storylines as far as the comic stories go. And it looks like the MCU, starting right here with Loki, is setting up the story, which is a bunch of different timelines, alternate realities, whatever you want to call them, start to kind of collide into each other. Some of the timelines and realities are getting destroyed and falling apart, and they start to fuse together with other timelines and other realities. Eventually, they all kind of collide into one, and the result is something truly awesome. We get multiple different versions of characters all interacting together, which is what I believe Marvel Studios is leading to within the next 10 years or so. It's going to be the next Avengers Endgame. So by that time, we'll have the X-Men, we'll have the Fantastic Four, and we could get multiple versions of Wolverine, the Hulk, Loki, Thor, Iron Man could come back and we could have a different version of him along with other different versions as well. Black Widow could even return. Nothing is really off the table, and that's something that is truly exciting about the future of the MCU. So the Timekeepers and the TVA control the sacred timeline. And as they explain, if anybody steps out of line and disrupts the timeline and creates a different branch of time, those are called variants, and our Loki is a variant. The main Loki was the one that actually died in Avengers Infinity War. So our Loki, the TVA has captured, and they put him on trial and they find him guilty. And they were going to reset him, which is just a kind of nicer term for kill. But Mobius, Owen Wilson's character, steps in because he thinks that Loki could be useful. Now here's where things start to get really interesting. Loki thinks that the TVA is a joke, when in reality they're kind of the greatest power of the universe, in the grand universe of which all different universes exist in. And Loki figures this out because when he tries to escape, he stumbles upon some Infinity Stones. And he finds out that the TVA kind of treats them like they're nothing. They use them for paperweights. He reveals that, of course, he tried to use the Tesseract plenty of times, and it didn't work. and he says that the TVA is formidable. And this is just one of some huge shocks that really make Loki start to question who he is and what kind of a god he is. Then of course, Mobius starts to kind of show him his future, and then Loki looks onto his future by himself. He watches his mother die, which was his fault. He watches his father die, which was kind of his fault as well. He sobs at both of these. Then he goes on to find out that him and his brother actually do kind of become brothers. And he fights alongside of Thor. And then he watches himself get killed. So this Loki from 2012, the god of mischief, is finding out that he's not as great as he thinks he is. And this changes him completely. He's no longer running from the TVA, and he realizes that he probably can't go back to his timeline and that eventually he will probably have to die. But then Mobius reveals the reason why he wants Loki to help him, and that is to catch another version of himself, Loki, which actually genuinely shocks Loki. And part of that shock is because Loki actually knows that this variant is stronger than he is. Mobius made that very clear. He said he specializes in dangerous variants. Our Loki said, like myself, and Owen Wilson's character Mobius laughed at him and said, "No, much more dangerous. You're a pussycat compared to these other variants." And in the final scene, we learn just how dangerous this Loki variant really is. Throughout the episode, we learned that there was a variant, this dangerous variant that they're talking about, attacking a TVA task force titled the Minutemen. This variant of Loki has attacked multiple different squadrons of Minutemen, and this variant has been collecting timeline reset charges, which is obviously very dangerous for the TVA because these charges reset timelines. In the final scene, we see the variant do one last attack before the episode ends on the TVA. When the TVA first get there, they realize that oil is on the ground, but they think it's just somebody who randomly discovered a time machine, came back in time to get a lot of oil so that they could be rich in the future. But then of course they see the hooded variant approach the hooded variant, and then this Loki immediately drops a lantern on the floor, igniting the oil and the Minutemen into flames, killing them all. Then after, the Loki variant successfully claims another reset charge. So it seems to be very clear that this Loki variant is setting up a big attack, and it's most likely going to be towards the TVA. Because remember, even though it's a variant of Loki, it's still Loki. And as we saw in this first episode, Loki really struggled with the idea of fate and destiny. He basically learned that the TVA kind of sets everybody's fate, and he definitely expressed his problems with that, saying that if he does something, it's because he did it and he chose to do it, not because the TVA deemed it so. So we can assume that this other Loki is like him and doesn't like the idea of somebody controlling his fate. So what is this Loki planning on doing? Well, it could be planning to unleash these charges that reset timelines inside of the TVA. It's very clear that a big attack is coming because this Loki variant is collecting charges. And the TVA must realize this because they know that they need this Loki's help in order to stop the other one from affecting other timelines and attacking the TVA. So it looks like a big battle is on its way. And that means pretty soon we are going to have a Loki versus Loki, and possibly Loki versus Loki versus Loki versus Loki, depending on how many variants show up, pretty soon. So be sure to let me know what you thought of the very first episode of the Loki series. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the latest Loki videos. Let me know what you rate Loki episode 1 in the comments down below. 1 through 10, 10 being the highest. Tomorrow I will have my full and complete episode breakdown out, so look out for that. Don't forget to like this video, and for live updates you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.